Day after cutdowns on Birds 365. McMullen and McDonald here to continue to analyze the Eagle roster. And we've got a helping hand to join us. It is Olivia R. from the Inquirer, and we call her Olivia R. because much like with Albert O., the new Eagle tight end, we're not going to
could go two ways, Olivia. So I just call you Olivia. So I'm not like Miss Reiner. Is it Reiner? Is it Reiner? Reiner? All right, that's what I went.
You got it. It's Reiner.
Reiner?
Yep.
Yeah. Damn, I was wrong. I was taking a guess. Was right.
I'm feeling a little left out. I didn't really realize that you're both Mac and I'm just Reiner. So that's I guess I got to change my last name.
No. Mac Reiner's not going to work. You stick with Reiner. And thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate it greatly. John and I have been kicking back a couple of things on the Eagles cut down, and there are some surprises there. And the one that just jumps out to me more than anything else is poor Michael Clay. Are they just gonna? He might have to play guys whose last name he can't pronounce or doesn't know well enough, because I don't know who the hell he's going to put out there for special teams. Yeah. Has it become that in the NFL? Or are the Eagles on an island by themselves here, just disregarding special teams, or is this another trend like devaluing running backs? Pretty soon, everybody in the league's going to be doing it.
I'm not too sure, but I think the Eagles, first of all, I think it's said a lot, but it's the initial 53. It's not the final 53. So the roster that we're seeing yesterday and right now is going to be different than the roster that we're seeing on game day, certainly, but even in 5 hours from now, or, so on and so forth, especially given the fact that the Eagles will have practice squad elevation. So the game day roster will be different. But that said, it's interesting. I'm not entirely certain what the plan is on special teams. It definitely seems like they're thin in that regard, but especially when it comes to punt returner, punter, we're going to have
thin
some
at punter
here soon. Non-existent at punter, some might say.
And I want to warn people that the Eagles made it pretty clear that, hey, Aaron Cepas might be back. He might be on the practice squad. They're going to work out some guys, but if they don't like what they see, they kind of made it clear that we still like Aaron. So if everybody's celebrating that, they should probably pump their brakes. Is that kind of the same sense you got?
Yeah. Punt or pump the brakes. Yeah, it definitely seems like that. A practice squad return could be a possibility there, but of course, Howie Roseman and the Eagles will do their due diligence, bring some punters in. Perhaps they've already had some eyes on some punters as they look to identify who that next guy is. But you're right, John. I mean, we heard from Howie Roseman yesterday, and he said that although Aaron Cepas may not have been happy with the way that the season ended last year for himself, certainly the team was not happy for the way that the season ended. The team still has confidence in Cepas. So at least that's what they're saying publicly. Cepas kind of echoed a similar sentiment when we spoke to him a few weeks ago in training camp. So there's a chance that we can see him return to the practice squad. However, the Eagles will look around the league, see who's out there. Plenty of punters were released from their training camp rosters. So perhaps the Eagles are mulling some of those guys over.
One of the numbers that jumped out to me, Olivia, was 3 linebackers. It just, you look like a nice young lady. John and I are 2 old men. I remember when there were like 6 to 7 to 8 linebackers on an NFL roster, not 3. I get it. The game has changed. And on some rosters, they actually list Hassan Reddick as a linebacker. He's not a linebacker. He's an edge player. He's a defensive end. But 3 linebackers on the entire team. And here's the fear I have. I think they're going to go with 3 linebackers. I don't think this is a roster maneuver. We're going to add one at another time. I think there's a good chance they're going to only have 3 linebackers on the roster all year. Who are those safeties who are going to get extra time at linebacker if they're going to be playing big nickel and dropping safeties down into the box?
Yeah, well, I think it's not just the safeties that will be contributing to that area, at least chipping in. At inside linebacker, we also saw throughout training camp, we also saw some of the edge rushers contributing, like Patrick Johnson and Nolan Smith. I don't know really how they feel about trying to get Nolan Smith out there when he's really just getting used to the NFL and getting used to the edge rusher position at this level. It might be a little too much at once, but when we spoke to Coach Nick Sirianni yesterday, he said that they got some eyes on Patrick Johnson in that role during training camp, and that they liked what they saw there. So it's a possibility that we see some of the edge rushers contribute at inside linebacker. And then, who knows? Potentially see some safeties in there. But I mean, right now we're still trying to get a sense of who is going to start alongside Reed Blankenship come week 1. So definitely a little bit of an eyebrow raiser about the how thin that position is right now. They're putting a lot of confidence in Nakobe Dean and even Zach Cunningham, who they signed during training camp to fill in that role. Big leap for Nakobe Dean in his second year in the league. So still a lot of questions there at inside linebacker. It would not shock me if they tried to bring in someone else in the coming days.
Yeah, and we saw a lot from Sean Desai, sort of these curveballs, I like to call them, James Bradbury in the slot. I saw Josh Sweat dropping at points in the coverage, and he, I like that. He likes to throw in the curveball, but you don't want that consistently. So there's two positions I'm concerned about numbers wise. And again, as we say, initial, not final, initial, linebacker, and then wide receiver. And Olivia, because those are two where you take sort of a pounding, a different type of pounding at linebacker than wide receiver. But receiver, you have the soft tissues you have to worry about. You have to practice. You need bodies to practice. And you see by the 90-man roster how built it is with wide receivers, cornerbacks as well. But they kept a ton of corners, so I'm not as concerned there. Just from the standpoint of the wear and tear of an NFL season, I think the Eagles got a little spoiled by the health of TJ Edwards and Kaiser White last year. Played all 20 games. It's probably not going to happen again. And Zach Cunningham just got here. That's a concern for me. Shouldn't the Eagles have a better plan B, I guess?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a fair question, and you can make the same similar arguments across the lineup just about the health. I mean, this was such a healthy team last season, and they really benefited from it all season long, getting to the Super Bowl, being able to bring out so many of their week 1 starters onto the field. It doesn't happen. And so in that sense, the Eagles could be due for a regression just because it's so rare that teams stay so healthy. So yeah, of course, when they're going to be thin at a certain position, that there are going to be those concerns. So that means that the general manager is going to have those backup plans. And as we've been saying all along, what we're seeing right now isn't necessarily the finished product. It's definitely not the finished product, and it's most likely not the exact iteration of the roster that we're going to see come as we get closer and closer to week 1. So I'm not rushing to any sort of conclusions, but I will say you're right. It definitely, the fact that they are so thin at certain positions, they don't want it to come back and bite them if they do end up dealing with any injuries.
And, oh, by the way, John's point, the reason why Zach Cunningham was available all the way into training camp is because he's been injury prone. So we expect him to come here and have no injuries whatsoever while playing every down for the Eagle. That's a good plan. We'll see. And it's so funny, Olivia. We do this every day. And last year at this time, even leading up to the season, we could have called it Hurts 365 because that's all we talked about with Jalen Hurts. Is he going to be good enough? Should he be the full-time quarterback? Is he stepping forward? Now we never even mention the guy's name. He's such a given, and that we just assume he's going to pick up right where he left off as one of the best, maybe second best quarterback in the National Football League. Are we missing the forest through the trees here, Olivia? Is there any chance that Jalen doesn't come out and ball out and dominate? Because we're all just putting it down in the given column for the Eagles quarterback this year.
Sure, and I can understand that mentality because until you are you reach a certain level in this league, especially at that position, unless your name is Tom Brady or Patrick Mahomes, there's always going to be an element of this guy has to prove himself. Can he do what he did last year? So I understand that approach and that thought process when it comes to Jalen Hurts, or really to any young quarterback looking to establish themselves in the league. However, with Hurts specifically, we've seen so much progression year over year, not just in the league, but also in college, continuously developing, continuously getting better, and continuously learning how to use all three aspects of his game that he likes to talk about, being a triple threat, using his arm, his legs, his mind on the field. He continues to take a step in his game every single year, especially culminating in last season when he was the runner-up MVP. So to me, in my mind, it's less of a concern. I don't think we saw anything that should make us feel nervous about Hurts going into this upcoming season, coming out of training camp. He did not get any preseason reps, just like the majority of the other starters. However, in training camp, he looked good, connecting with all the usual suspects, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, Dallas Goedert, and looking good on the ground as well. So I think of all of the concerns that the Eagles may have going into the regular season, Jalen Hurts should not be one of them.
Yeah, zero concern other than I hope I don't have to see Marcus Mariota. Nothing against Marcus, nice guy, but you hope you don't have to see him play this year. Jalen had a tremendous, tremendous summer. There's no evidence of, Jeffrey Lurie called him the most mature 24-year-old he's ever met. Now he's 25. That hasn't changed.
I just can't. The fact that he's 25 years old, it is kind of mind-boggling.
Yeah,
but mind-boggling. Not only just the way
he's more
he
mature
plays.
than me. He's an old soul. It's bizarre. But we had kind of an interesting day in that, we're talking to the GM of the Eagles and we don't know who's cut. So we're all like culling over the list when they finally get it to us. Well, while you were doing that, any surprises jump out at you? Or did you say,
Yeah, it's easy for me to say that there were no surprises, but I also, my 53-man roster that I contributed to the beat pool, I didn't win. So
I didn't win either. No
So,
shame there.
I
The
can't say
usual
that.
suspects did not do well. That would be me, Jimmy, Kemsky, Bo Wolf. Jeff is in it. Jeff's still in it. Jeff McLean, your colleague at the Inquirer. So he's the only one. Dave Zangaro's not in it. So yeah, they surprised a bunch of us. So I wouldn't take yourself so harshly. Yeah,
It's okay. I'll brush it off. I learned. I think I was too conservative. I think they were smart, and it's easy looking back in hindsight, but they were smart to go light at the positions where the Eagles just didn't have as much talent at the top. Or sorry, I guess I should say more depth-wise. Going light at receiver, going light at linebacker, even at safety, especially among the specialists. Like, for example, I had Britton Covey on my roster. I had Aaron Sipas on my roster. So I could have been a little bit more maybe liberal with the cuts and trying to go heavier at other places on the roster, especially along the defensive line, cornerback.
Front. What are they trying to collect? Defensive front players? Are they trying to get the first 53-man defensive front? 13. Because I knew they wanted to keep Kentavious Street, and I said to myself, well, they can't keep 13. They can't. Well, they did. I keep going back to Michael Clay. Like, what's Michael Clay supposed to do with Kentavious Street or Moro Ajomo? I mean, and Olivia, it's understandable you keep Moro. That's why I kept Moro on my 53 because he's a young player. Kentavious is a vested veteran. You can put him on the street. You can say, hey, do what you did with Fred Johnson. We're going to bring you back. We love you. Give them all the accolades. I don't know. This is, I think there's valid criticism there, but it's only going to show up if the Eagles don't perform on special teams.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It was a little bit of I wasn't necessarily expecting all of those names being kept on the roster. at defensive tackle, but I guess they don't want to, the guys that would be subjected to waivers, they don't want to risk losing them, or they don't want them to walk. So this is, I guess you got to do what you got to do, but it certainly leaves some questions to be answered elsewhere on the roster and elsewhere, especially on special teams.
Now, I've got a read between the lines roster question for you, and it's probably unfair, but I'll apologize for it in advance. We know it's a collaborative effort. When they came up with the 53 names yesterday, it was done by a large group of people. Howie is the main guy. It's going to be on his resume at the end of the day, right, wrong, or indifferent. How much do you think the new coordinators had a hand in this? They're both new to the position. They're both respected and got the gigs, but do you think they had influence with, if you believe Howie is the main driver of the bus, do you think they had minimal influence, decent influence, overriding influence in how this 53-man was put together?
It's a good question, and I will say whatever comes out of my mouth is just speculation. So
right. That's why I said it was an unfair question. I'm asking you to speculate for me, Olivia.
Yeah, at the end of the day, I think they should have a seat at the table where the conversation is happening, because they're the ones out on the field evaluating the talent, dealing with them every single day. They should have some degree of influence, but at the end of the day, should they be the ones making the decisions? No, and of course they're not. That's Howie Roseman's job. He has the final say. But yeah, I think that their influence should matter to an extent. Just because they're new to their roles doesn't make them new to football or new to evaluating good talent. I think that if the Eagles saw enough in them to put them in their roles, then they should trust their talent evaluation skills as well. So I would imagine that they should have some sort of voice in that room. But how much of a voice, I don't really know.
Bit of a initiation to the show here for you, Olivia, because at some point you're going to learn that Jody does not like Derek Barnett.
You mean they didn't get that day 3 pick for him yesterday? There was no one in the National Football League who was willing to give up a day 3. Shocks.
So
Derek Barnett's still on the Eagles.
I told you, you're getting the initiation. So one trade happened. Alberto, don't want to butcher his name yet before I learn it completely, comes in. They weren't able to trade Derek Barnett. Now, the Eagles say he's going to have a role on game day. Clearly he wanted out because he wants a new contract. How do you get a new contract? He's on the final year. You got to play. So it's understandable. As far as, we all knew kind of how he was going to make a trade because he gets antsy and he's going to do something. So we'll start with Alberto. He's kind of a size traits prospect, very big, very fast, but never lived up sort of the hype in Denver. Could that be sort of a out of the box way of handling what I talked about as a receiver? So if you play more 2 tight end sets, but you have a glorified receiver, bigger receiver, whether it's Albert or Grant Calcaterra, who they also kept on the 53. Could they go about it that way? And then does Derek Barnett's presence here, does that concern you about Nolan Smith? We talked about him a little bit. Guy hasn't practiced in 12 days. I mean, and everybody's like, what? It's not that big of a deal. It seems like it's a big deal.
Yeah. You have a lot, 2 questions and 2. I'm trying to separate them in my mind. So why don't we go?
Albert and Nolan Smith.
Yes. So, all right. So regarding Albert, yeah, sure. It's, who knows, as you mentioned, didn't pan out necessarily the way that the Broncos might have wanted him to. So why not take a chance on him, especially given where the Eagles would have been in the waiver order? Why not try to get ahead of that, make a trade of a pretty, late draft pick in 2025 and get the player that you have some interest in, who flashed in the preseason, as Howie Roseman spoke about, over 100 receiving yards in the final preseason game.
Preseason games.
Yeah, well, maybe 100 yards, not anything to
it tells
ignore.
Me you played in the preseason game, which is not good. if you're a veteran player. So
And the
that's what
third
it kinda tells
preseason
me.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, not just any preseason game, the third
Yeah.
preseason. But anyway, you know what? Hey, I think easy perhaps to look at a player and say, oh, I can fix him. We can fix him. He hasn't been exposed to our guys yet. So perhaps maybe the Eagles can in the best case scenario. Not that I feel like fix is the wrong word, but maybe that the Eagles can get something out of him that the Broncos were not able to. And you're right, he has all these raw traits, the size, the speed, the 40-yard dash, the lower body flexibility that Howie Roseman spoke about yesterday. They seem to be really in love with these traits of his. Now it's just about, can they get the most out of him on the field? And yeah, the more options they have in this offense, the better. It's still probably going to run through the same 3 receivers. However, you know, just even, and who knows what DeAndre Swift will be able to contribute to in the passing game. So the more options that they have, the more that they can spread the ball around, or at least look like they're going to spread the ball around, the better that'll be for the offense. And then as far as Derek Barnett is concerned and Nolan Smith, yeah, I mean, the fact that we talked to Nolan Smith following his last preseason showing, and he kind of downplayed the situation and didn't think very much of his the injury, or you know, whatever it is that he's working through. The fact that he hasn't practiced is certainly not what, as fans, you would want to see, and the team probably doesn't want to see that. So as we get closer to the start of week 1, and if he's not on the field, I certainly the concern level would start to rise a little bit more, but we'll see where he is. I don't know if Derek Barnett's presence on the roster has anything to do with Nolan Smith. One would think that if it were something more serious with Smith, I don't know. I don't know what they would do with him. They would try to stick him on IR and try to, you know, get a roster spot there or something. But yeah, I'm kind of intrigued to see what happens there with Smith, how quickly he's able to return to practice. And then, yeah, with Barnett, we'll see that I guess it's easy to tell us that they want him to have a role on the team, or they envision a role on the team for him, because I don't know what else would they say to us. We don't see a role for him here.
They truly envisioned a role for him on the team.
He
wouldn't have been given permission to seek a trade 2 days before the cut deadline. So you can read into that whatever you want. And one thing I don't want to read into Nolan Smith is, oh, and he's going to be playing outside linebacker because they're so short at linebacker. Yeah. Take a rookie who's hurt, and let's teach him a new position on the fly. That's a game plan.
And my concern was when he got asked about his shoulder, he called it his baby, and he said sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I'm like, what does that mean? Isn't that a concern? Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. That was a red flag to me. That concerned me. So it's something to keep an eye on. I just bring that up for people.
Let me ask you about another non-question that maybe should be a question. Quez Watkins has missed a bunch of time here in the preseason as well. And let me double check. Oh, that's right. 4 wide receivers on the team at a position where NFL teams carry 6 and 7 wide receivers. The Eagles have 4 as of right now. Do we read into that yeah, Quez is fine. We know Quez didn't play much, and Quez missed practice, and Quez hasn't been out there all that much. But, yeah, Quez is fine. Are we believing that Quez is 100% fine, or is that something that you got to try and ferret out this week before they get to New England?
Yeah, it's a good question. He did not get a lot of reps in camp just because of the injury and sitting out, which certainly is not, I guess, for someone in his position who's looking to take, you know, another step this year in his game. That's not necessarily what you want to see, but they're putting a lot of faith in him to make that step. Whether, you know, they know something we don't know his progression. But I'm kind of, I'm very curious. He is someone that I think we're all going to have our eye on. In terms of just, will he be able to continue to develop and show a little bit more than he has in the past? But yeah, that's a big question mark. I think as we've said all along, the receiving core behind Smith, it's just, and Devontae Smith and AJ Brown having a great early. It's a big question mark. I thought Zacchaeus looked good in camp. I think he's a good addition to this group. But yeah, behind the 3 of them, it'll be we'll have to learn a lot more as we get closer and closer to that week 1, and as they start to fill out some spots also on the practice squad. I think we should expect to see lots of receivers who were released signed to the practice squad.
Yep.
At Reiner Olivia, last name first name last. Follow her on Twitter, or X as it is now. Make sure you read her at inquirer.com. She's doing a tremendous job with, boy, you guys run deep these days. You got Jeff, you got EJ, you got Josh, plus Sealski and Marcus and all the columnists. So
unlike the Eagles at linebacker, we got a lot of positional depth.
You guys are deep, man. You guys are like the defensive line. That's what you guys run deep. So running backs was sort of like, we kind of knew that at the end. Poor Trey Sermon had to be the crash test dummy in the final preseason game. And by the way, he gets hurt. I feel bad for him. He gets waived injured. But what I want from you is, though, and we don't know, and I always say this, Olivia, because the Eagles are so situationally focused. Like, that's all they practice. They practice red zone. They practice backed up. They practice hurry up. And in those, I'd like to call them high leverage situations, it's Kenny Gainwell. Yeah, we see Kenny Gainwell. But when they kick it off in New England and it's 1st and 10 from the 25, who's going to be that volume back, do you think, for the Eagles?
Right now it seems like it could be DeAndre Swift. But I don't know if that is necessarily the kind of running back Swift is. Rashad Penny could really also emerge into that role. He's more of the between the tackles type of runner. But the question with Penny is, can he stay healthy? That'll be, really that's the big question with most running backs is, can they stay healthy? Can they stay on the field? Luckily for the Eagles, they're bringing in 4 options to start the season. So they've got some guys, but for now, I would assume that Swift is going to get a lot of the touches early on in the season. And then I think the by committee approach will start to kick in. We'll start to see Kenny Gainwell continuing to rise. It seemed like he was, like, as you mentioned, one of the go-to guys during camp, getting reps with the starters. So wouldn't be surprised to see him continue to ascend as the season gets going.
Last one for me, Olivia, and thank you much for jumping in this morning. Since it's the first time we had you on, and rest assured, a return engagement invitation will be in the offing. NFC this year, if we all kind of believe it's the Eagles' conference to lose, they're the defending champs. They've got as good a roster as anybody else. So we believe they're very much in the mix, the top-rated team going into the season. Is it Eagles and 49ers close? Eagles and 49ers and then a drop-off? Eagles and 49ers and then a drop-off to whoever's number 3 or 4 or 5 or 6. Give us your overall read on the NFC picture before they kick off the 2023 season.
Yeah, I think the 49ers are going to be up there. I'm looking forward to seeing whatever the NFC Championship game rematch ends up being. I'm not saying it's going to be 49ers and Eagles necessarily. Who knows?
It's exactly what it's going to be. So go ahead and say it.
Okay. All right, then I said it. There it is. But, in a vacuum, that would make sense, right? But that the league isn't played in a vacuum. Injuries happen, things happen that we don't foresee. So it's hard to sit here. That's why predictions are so difficult. There are just always going to be factors that no one is ever going to be able to foresee. But that's how the sport goes. That's the beauty of what we do. It's fun to discuss. But yeah, I would say those 2 teams are at the top. I also feel like the Cowboys are going to be up there too, seeming to be pretty competitive. I think I'm excited to see how that game goes as well, matchup on the road against the Eagles. I'm excited to get back to Dallas. I haven't been there in a while. So yeah, those are kind of the top 3 in my mind, and then there's maybe more of a drop off after that. So but you never know. You never know. There's always someone who comes out of nowhere, comes out of the woodwork. So it'll be fun to
speaking
follow along with this season.
Speaking of predictions, if somebody would have had Albert O on their prediction, now that would have been impressive. That would have been very impressive.
The season is absolutely scripted if someone would have had Albert O on their
that would have been Bo.
And they knew about it.
Yeah, that would have been Bo, because he used to work for the team. So You know,
See,
Okay.
and
All right. Well, there
I
you go.
would have gone Fred Warner at linebacker, and that didn't happen either. So you got to stick with those that are on the roster when you make your predictions.
Exactly.
Olivia, we appreciated jumping in with us today. Thanks for the insight. Yes, I am speaking from the heart. Definitely going to get you back on during the year. Thanks for doing it with us today.
All right. Yeah, of course. Anytime.
thanks,
Our pleasure. Olivia Reiner. See, I was thinking
I got that one
Rainier.
right. I got
You
something
did.
right.
You got that. You and Xander double team me. You said, I think it's Reiner. I'm going with Rainier.
Yeah.
No, it's
Well, you want
Olivia.
the hockey route. You want you wanted to throw the Frenchness on the, which it could have been. Yeah.
And once again, McDonald wrong on the pronunciations. McMullen's much better at the pronunciations than me, which is stupid because I'm a radio guy. I should know how to pronounce somebody's name. John's a writer. All he has to know is how to spell it. Yet he's better at the pronunciations than I am.
I can't spell it yet either. I was copy and pasting that bad boy yesterday. You get it once and just copy
Alberto.
Yeah.
You know, who's a big fan? And we're due to get him on again too. We should now. The college football season is underway. Saratella liked him a lot.
Well, that's because he's a traits guy, man. He's a traits guy. So when you look at him athletically, you're like, wow. That's what the Eagles see in him. A lot of those draft guys like Rick, they love those traits guys. I mean, he's 260, runs like in the 4.4s. I mean, he can run, but you know, he's had some injuries, never lived up to what they hoped, and he was going to get waived. That the report was already out there. That's why when you always see the reports of so-and-so is going to get waived, a lot of times they throw that out there, especially with guys that might have some value and say, well, you better get in line. And the Eagles, remember, as you pointed out astutely yesterday, they're 31st in line.
31st.
Yeah. So they might claim a bunch of guys and not get them. So, you know, that's only Kansas City's below them for obvious reasons. So that's a difficult spot to be in when it comes to waivers. But I'd rather be a good team and get somebody off waivers. So.
Understood. And do I know that Alberto is going to do anything for the Eagles this year? No, I know nothing. Could he? Yeah, maybe. Here's what I know. It's you and I have kind of batted this one back and forth, and Howie is outstanding. He knows how to play the game. He knows what value is. Dropping down a 6th-round pick to a 7th-round pick to get a guy who you're going to have on your 53-man roster. Even if he doesn't make it, I'm not going to go back and go, oh my God, how he got fleeced. He would have been released. Why would you give up anything to get a guy who was going to be released? Because then you don't get him. Because somebody else is probably going to grab him. You're going to go 31st and somebody's going to take him before you. So if you like the player, just dropping down one round.
And by the way, they're 2025 picks too. You know, which is goofy.
The
but
further away you get away from it, the less value it has.
Yeah,
correct.
Exactly. That's how they look at it. Which is not necessarily the case or should be the case, but that's the way the league looks at it. So yeah, he gave up essentially nothing. You know, that's why even what I said with Barnett, I said maybe they can get a conditional 6th. I'm not saying that's great. They're probably not going to, if they did make that move, they're probably not going to get anything great out of it by any stretch of the imagination if you're playing the odds. So, yeah, I'm not going to. I didn't even get mad at Robert Quinn last year. I'm like, who cares? Take a shot. You're a Super Bowl team. Didn't work. I don't kill him for that.
But you got to be careful with that because we give him that much credit for CJGJ. And that was, again, two day 3 picks. So if we're not, throw away the day 3 pick for Robert Quinn, well, then we can't give Howie too much credit for going out and get CJGJ.
No, I mean, it didn't work. But all I'm saying is I'm not trying to dismiss it and saying it worked. It didn't work at all. He was damaged goods. It was a mistake, but I just don't think it's the kind of mistake that's going to affect you long term, shall I say. So I don't think, I don't think it's going to affect you. So I can't get too worked up about it.
Let me run one more thing by you. Then we got to get a break. We got Eric Edholm, NFL.com, outstanding league writer, is going to join us coming up in 20 minutes from now. let's say Albert O comes in here and he wows them. Not necessarily with his offense, but with his blocking.
I don't think that's going to happen from everything I read, Jody. But it's possible. He's a big guy.
He's got the size, and if they can convince him, you want to make a name in this league, you want to stay in the league, maybe effort was at times not always there on the blocking aspect of his game. He comes in and surprises him, wows him with his blocking. Do you think Jack Stoll's spot on the roster could be in jeopardy? Because he is, quote unquote, the blocking tight end right now. If Albert comes in here and is as good, if not better than Stoll in the blocking aspect, they break down the film and go, Albert just as good, that when they need a roster spot, they can't carry 3 tight ends, even looking at Calcaterra as a quasi wide receiver. Could Stoll's roster spot come in question?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, Jack is, I think Jack is a guy that, you know, he's not sexy, but Jalen Hurts likes him. That impacts things. And plus, I don't think that's the type of player Albert is. I mean, from everything I've read, he's more of a receiver than a blocker. Even though he's almost 6'6", 260. You would think the opposite, but remember, the game has changed, Jody. So a lot of these guys aren't asked to block. Dallas Goedert wasn't asked to block at all, but the Eagles were surprised. They're like, "Wow, he can block." So when you do have somebody that embraces it, yeah, they can do it if he's got that kind of size. But I don't think that's what went on in Denver. So they would have to uncover something, which is possible. But he's more of a receiver than a blocker. So I think it's more related to Grant Calcaterra than Jack Stoll.
We shall see what the role it turns out to be for Alberto here in the Eagles offense. John McMullen, Jody McDonald, the Birds 365 Mac and Mac duo coming back. We got hour number 2 coming your way on the Roster Claim Day.